thing. I need my light. Where is my light? We're live. It's going to be a little bit dark over here. How's everybody doing? We are live, 6:07. Where I'm here early. I'm going to only be here for, I don't know, 30 or 40 minutes probably. Then I've got to get going. We are going to talk about ported heads tonight. And although right before I got on here, I was checking comments, and I got a comment, and I salute the gentleman that made the comment. He has made comments before. He is obviously a David Vizard disciple, and he's a tight lobe separation angle guy, obviously very intelligent. And at some point, maybe later on, I'll go ahead and read that to you and tell you why he's the most intelligent person in the world and why I'm an idiot and stuff. So it'll be really good. But I don't want to talk about that tonight. What I want to talk about is ported head. So the thumbnail that I have up is a ported V6 head, primarily because I got a comment, actually an email, about a guy asking me, hey, look, I've got a 3800 supercharged motor, and I promise you, we've been beating this poor M90 horse, and it will go away. There'll be other stuff. In fact, the next video that I'm going to do, actually, oddly enough, the next video that I'm going to do is a tight LSA camshaft test, although not, I'm sure, the one that they want to see. But we'll get past this M90 stuff, but not before doing a twin M90, because, you know, you got one that's good. You got to do two of them, right? But this is a 3800, and the comment that I got, or the email that I got, is, hey, look, I have a 3800 and I want to make this given amount of power. What should I do? Should I port the head? And my response was, no, you shouldn't. I mean, if you want to make lots of power in a given combination, whether it's an LS or small block Chevy or small block Ford, first of all, you have to look at what combination you have. What do you have, and what are the restrictions? Like, what are the deficits? So in the case of a small block Ford, for instance, everything is a deficit. Unfortunately, unlike the LS, we have good cylinder heads, we have a good intake manifold. It just needs a camshaft, and you can get a really long way with just the camshaft, as long as, obviously, as this guy pointed out, you have to pick the right LSA. But if you put a camshaft in an LS, it has the other two things that it needs. It has whatever displacement you pick. You have a 4.8 or a 5.3 or so, or 6.2 or whatever. You have that. You have compression. You know, you have cylinder head. You have a good intake manifold, whether it's a truck intake manifold or an LS1 or 2 or 3. Not the LS1, hopefully, and not the LS4, which is awesome, which is awful. But other than that, you have pretty good stuff. And so you put a camshaft in it, you look like a hero. That doesn't happen with a 5-liter Ford, and it also doesn't happen with a small block Chevy. There is no combination where you have lots of head flow and it's just begging for more camshaft. You have to do other things. So you can put a camshaft in a small block Chevy or put a camshaft in a small block Ford, and you will get good gains. Obviously, you have to do a valve spring, which are kind of normal with a camshaft. You have to do that. But you're not going to get as far because you don't have the head flow. To give you an idea, we'll put some numbers to it. If you take a small block Chevy or a small block Ford, and a small block Ford is way worse than some of the small block Chevy stuff, but the small block Ford flows 160 CFM. Well, an LS motor flows 230 or 240 CFM, and more if it's a 799 head or a 243 head, and way more if it's a rec port head. It flows 315. It flows what race heads flow, you know, not too long ago. So adding a camshaft to that, all of a sudden you're making 1 million horsepower. But on our little small block Chevys or small block Fords, you don't have enough head flow. On the small block Ford, you have 160 something CFM. On a small block Chevy, you might have a bit more than that, up to 200 or 210 CFM. Again, not as much as the LS, so not as good. So the gains that you get from a camshaft, you can get some, obviously, but not what you would normally get, because you just don't have like an overabundance of cylinder head flow, and that's part of the problem. So at what point do we port the head? When you ask yourself that, like on this 3800, the first thing you have to realize is, what situation am I in? How does all of my stuff work right now? So is the head a limitation? Should I put a camshaft in it? And that was my recommendation. So, well, the first thing you should do is put a camshaft in it. Almost without exception, whatever stock cam or cams in case of a 4-valve motor, or a 2-valve, an overhead cam deal like on a modular Ford, you have mild cam timing. The factory stuff is going to be mild, and for good reason. What they're trying to achieve is they're not never trying to make maximum power. They're trying to make some power goal, but that's really secondary compared to the other things. They'll achieve their power goal. They're really pretty sharp, despite what some people in their comments think. They're pretty sharp. They can make that happen. That's nothing. That's an inconsequential deal. But to achieve that, along with all of the other design goals, that becomes the thing. So they do that with a camshaft, and quite honestly, the camshaft that they chose to achieve what they achieved is not the only one that will do that. There's lots of others that will also do that. That will also achieve the combination of emissions and drivability and idle and all these things. There's more than one camshaft or camshafts in the case of 2-valve and 4-valve overhead cam things that will also achieve the same thing. But what they use worked, obviously. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that. But when you're looking at camshaft changes, in the case of this V6, he said, well, should I port the heads? I'm like, well, yes, you should, because those particular heads are not that great. They're like a 5-liter Ford, and more like a 5-liter Ford than they are an LS, despite the fact that they're a later version and more cathedral port-esque, I guess, than they are early small block Ford or small block Chevy. But that's not the first thing that I would do. I would go in order of what it needs. So when you're looking at something, how can I get gains from this? Well, what does it need most? Well, that particular combination on a 3800 was boosted. This one was an L67 or an L32. What should I do to get the most gains? What I like to do on that particular thing is, and I didn't do this way early on when I was doing Ram Air Technology stuff. I wish that I would have. It would have made life a lot easier. Is I wish I would have put a camshaft in, cam and springs, because if you put cam and springs in, several things happen. One, especially if you pick the right LSA, a couple of things happen with a camshaft. Going from a stock cam to some kind of performance cam, whatever we decide that is. I don't know a lot of people that have tested more camshafts than I have, but if you take a look at a camshaft upgrade versus a stock one, you're going to get some kind of gain depending on the bigness of the camshaft. How much does a cam offer? Does it offer a gain of 20 horsepower, 30 or 40 or 50 or even 100 or more, depending on what kind of combination you're testing it on? What are the gains? So how much is the camshaft worth? When you're running this on a factory supercharged or even turbocharged combination, the gain's twofold on a boosted application. And this is why I like doing this. You add power from the camshaft. Even if the thing was NA, going from a stock cam to a better cam, you're going to add power. But on a boosted application, you're going to make more power and you're going to drop the boost, which is like a double whammy. It's a win-win kind of combination, which are the kinds of wins that we like. We like wins, but we like win-wins even better. So on a boosted application, if you can make more power and lower the boost, what else have you done? Well, you've lowered the detonation threshold. If the boost is lower, the charge temperature is lower, just everything is better. A lower charge temperature, more airflow, less boost, more power. It's just like it's a triple win in that case. And so that's a better deal. Naturally, if you put a camshaft in, you have to put springs, but then also you have to start thinking on when you do a camshaft, regardless of what these magic LSA guys talk about. If you do a camshaft, at some point you're going to have to start looking at, okay, what are my trade-offs? So if I have this combination and I put a camshaft in, can I get a camshaft that makes more power than the stock one everywhere? For the off idle guys. Off idle to wherever you're revving it to. Yes, you can. In some cases, you can. You can make it basically be better everywhere. But at some point, you're going to start trading. That's the nature of camshafts. And if you don't think that that's the case, you haven't done enough camshaft testing. So what happens is if you start gaining more power up top, you'll start losing power down low. And no amount of magic valve events are going to change that. That's what starts happening. It has to. It can't not. So you start losing power down low and you start gaining, you start trading out, and you have trade-offs, and you have to decide, is that like, what am I willing to put up with? Do I want to change the converter? Do I care about idle quality? Do I care about the price of a custom cam? If I'm doing a custom cam right now, I'm just talking about shelf cams, so it's just an off-the-shelf thing. Although some of these shelf cams are more expensive than others, but you have to take that all into consideration. But if you start with a camshaft, then you get to the point where, hey, look, I'm making on this blower application or an NA or anything. I've done the camshaft. Let's say we've done a camshaft on a small block Ford, a small block Chevy, a 3800 supercharged V6 and LS. I've done the camshaft. Now what do I do? Well, now you have to look at the next thing that's in line. So in the 3800, ported heads are a pretty good choice. But in that particular instance, what I would do is what 99% of the people do. They just turn the boost up. I mean, if you have a blower that has a given pulley size on it and it's not the smallest pulley that you possibly can run on there, then you change the pulley and you raise the boost. So you go from a 3.8-inch pulley down to a 3.6, a 3.4, a 3.2, a 3.0, and we've gone all the way down to a 2.6. When you do that, you raise the boost, and you raise the boost everywhere. In fact, in the case of a positive displacement blower, when you speed the blower up, the gains oftentimes are much better down low than they are up top. You get up top is where you get into belt slippage issues and things. And also, if you have a mild cam where you're not revving it very high, the gains that you get are more pronounced down low than they are up top. So you have to take all that stuff into consideration. But what is the next thing? Like, if we've done the camshaft, do we need to look at ported heads? That's certainly a viable deal. And more so on some applications than others. Like on an LS, I tell guys, hey, look, if you're trying to make 1,000 horsepower and you put a cam and springs in it and you put a turbo on it, don't worry about the cylinder head. Get to the point where other considerations are necessary with stock heads. And that's not that it doesn't flow enough. It flows enough to make a good bit of power. A stock head can flow enough, in the case of an LS3, enough to make 650 horsepower, NA. So that's a lot to start out with. Even on some of the better cathedral port heads, it's enough to make 500 horsepower. We know because we've done that. So if you can make 500 horsepower NA and you start multiplying that out at 14.7 pounds of boost, that becomes 1,000 horsepower. That's a lot. But at some point, like on the LS, you start thinking about something else that has nothing to do with cylinder head or flow, but it has to do with sealing for the cylinder head. Okay, now the deck surface is coming into play. There are always other things that become issues that are not just performance-oriented things. We can talk about the performance part of it all that we want, but a lot of times it's not that. It actually is something else. So on the LS, we get to a point where, hey, look, can I make 1,500 horsepower with a stock head? Yes, you can. It flows enough to do that. If you flow enough to make 500 horsepower and you start multiplying that out at 2 bar, you're at 1,500 horsepower. Now the question is, can the thin deck surface of a stock head withstand that? And if it can for one run, can it do it for 2 runs? Can it do it for 3 or 4? Can it do it for passes down the quarter mile? You start coming into a point where, hey, look, I need an aftermarket head, not so much because it flows more, but because it's stouter, and now it has, a thicker deck. We can clamp it. We can put some real CA625 head studs on it and clamp it down, put a better head gasket on. So that part of it is sealed. And oh yeah, by the way, when we put an aftermarket head on a trick flow and airflow research dart, whatever, it also flows a lot more. So now the side benefit of that is that not only are we sealing things up and able to run this boost level, now it makes more power, and we don't have to run that boost level because now it makes so much more power NA because of the ported heads. All that's possible. So going back to our 3800 with a ported 3800 head, the nice thing is that a lot of these guys with these 3800s, these V6s, they just turn the boost up. It's easier. You just keep putting smaller pulleys on there, more boost. As long as you don't get belt slippage, it starts making more power. You put E85 in it, you got to put big injectors in it. For those guys blow up the transmissions before something else happens. But if you take that motor, and as we'll see in the Big Bang motor, which I have coming up before too long, hopefully, is that the stock bottom end with ring gap Very important. And you can make lots and lots of power. But if you put ported heads on it and a cam on it, and then we're going to do some kind of weird ported intake manifold on there, you can make lots and lots of power. And you can get to the point where, for this particular instance, either an L67 or L32, you get to the point where your motor can take every bit of whatever that factory M90 supercharger can take. So in our case, we've made over 600 horsepower with an M90, with a Gen 5 M90, a slightly modified, Super Richie style M90. We've made over 600 with that. And doing that on 3800 means that you have to do what we did on the 5.3. You have to make the NA combination much more powerful. And ported heads are kind of the way to do that. So you have to put a camshaft in there and ported heads, and then hopefully a ported intake, although the factory very short runner intake manifold that they use on those blower V6s is short runner. It should flow fairly well, although on our big bang one, we're going to port it. It does flow very well and wants to make peak power at the top of the RPM range. So hopefully that's not limiting the power output of the blower. I think you can get to the limit of the factory blower with that combination, with ported 3800 heads and some kind of decent cam. There's lots of good shelf cams available. With the combination of those two things, you can get to the limit of the blower. And then you got to make the blower better. So you got to port the inlet of the blower, port the discharge of the blower, spin the snot out of it so it's making a lot of RPM and lots of power. And the thing is, like on our V8, where we spun this blower up, we had such a good and powerful NA motor that it didn't make very much boost, because the amount of boost that the blower makes is a function of the RPM of the blower relative to the motor, but also the NA power output of that motor. The more powerful the NA motor, the lower the boost is, the greater the flow is. So making the motor more powerful, i.e. with the ported heads that we're talking about, obviously always a good idea. And that's where ported heads come into play, like we were talking about. But the problem is it's not absolute. And people, unfortunately, these people that are making comments about lobe separation angle, they want life to be an absolute thing. Well, should I port the heads? I'm running a turbo motor. I want to make lots of power. Should I port the heads? Maybe you should. Maybe you shouldn't. Depends on the application. Is it necessary? Are ported heads necessary for you to achieve the thing that you need to achieve? You need to step back and not look at what people like me are saying or other people are saying. You need to look at it and go, hey, look, let's get our information from lots of different sources and go, hey, look, I've got a set of 706 heads. I've got a 4.8. I've got a cam in it. I've got springs in it. And I have an S475 turbo. I can get to the limit of that turbo without doing ported heads. So therefore, I don't need it. Step back and go over to another combination. I have a 5-liter Ford. I'm not going to get to the limit of that S475 with a stock 5-liter, or it's going to be very difficult, and it's going to take a lot of boost to get there, because you're talking about a 300 horsepower motor versus a 450 horsepower motor or more, and the amount of pressure that it takes to get to the limit of that blower, of that turbo, obviously much more boost. So that's my spiel. Let's see what you guys got going on today. Oh, I can't wait to read you guys all of this stuff, because you guys will love it. And I want guys to make comments like this. Like, he's a great guy. I think I know who it is, but he definitely is a disciple of Dave, and I love David Vizard. He's a great guy. Like I said, I talk to him periodically, and Dave and I get along fantastically. But there are guys that, when we get this, that whatever their thing is, the way that they do it is the only way. It's like being Christian or Muslim or whatever religion you choose. That's the only thing that you can be, and everything else is terrible. Well, not really. Okay, let's see what you guys got going. We do need a poll. Okay, should you port your heads on a small block Chevy before you add a blower? A little generic, I'll admit. Just curious what people say. So let's go back up to our. I'm going to scroll. Depends on how much power you're trying to make and what you're trying to get. Yep, that we went through that. How much gauging would you get from ported heads only? And Charles, that's actually a good question, and I'm happy to say that I have tested that many times, where we just do ported heads on stock motors. So to give you an idea, on an LS3, we ported that or put ported heads on an LS3, and it's worth 10 horsepower. But we ran ported heads on a good motor with a cam and displacement, all kinds of stuff, and then it's worth 50 or 60 or 70. So which one of those is accurate? And the answer is they're both accurate, right? Camaro LT1, what's going on? Necessary? No. Desired? Oh yeah. I know. When you go and walk, if you've ever been to the SEMA show or the PRI show or any of those things, and you walk up to any of the manufacturers that have ported heads and go, ooh, and everyone puts their fingers in the ports and they're like, oh, that's like CNC ported. That's awesome. Everybody does it. It is awesome. Are you on Telegram? I have no idea what Telegram. I mean, I know what a Telegram is. I know that. That's old school stuff, but I don't know if that's something new. What's your favorite LS? My favorite LS is whatever the next one that I'm testing. Yes, they're always worth it. What, ported heads are always worth it? Nothing's necessary, but I think everyone wants ported heads. All the porting in the world means nothing if you don't have everything else in place to take advantage of it. End of story. That's the thing. What I've said is the absolute thing. It's not. Everything makes more power when boosted. Exactly. But, and I've caught myself doing this too, because for a long time, especially early on in my career, you see the air quotes sneak up there. I was a big proponent of making as much power as you can NA before adding the boost. But that was when we had 5-liter Fords, and it really was kind of necessary to get more power NA because it had a bad intake manifold that had bad cylinder heads. It actually had a reasonable camshaft, but you always want to put a camshaft in. So if you can make more power NA, then everything that you do, like we talked about, happens at a lower boost level, which is nothing but beneficial. Ported stock LS heads. Yes, ported, and we saw that in the video, and now I think it's so old because I think that it's happened back in 2010 or something. The big LS cathedral port head test that I did, a set of ported sock heads, like a set of ported 243 heads that everybody loves, those flow as much as aftermarket LS heads. They just don't have the deck thickness that the other heads do, but you certainly can get the airflow and the power offered by any of the ported heads. I mean, any of the CNC ported aftermarket castings. You can get the stock head. There are lots of guys that have really good programs for them. You can make a lot of power with those, and lots of guys have, and that's definitely a way to go. Just blew up my 5.7. I've been watching all your videos. I have a couple of questions. Dude, just ask the questions, man. You don't got to tell us you have questions. Just ask the questions. 3/4 race cam, yes. Why buy ported heads when for almost the same price you can go aftermarket heads that will outflow any ported factory head? This is a 2-valve question. I think way more guys run ported stock 2-valve heads than do trick flow heads because there's really only one choice for those. The absolute LSA guys should sit on the K20, K24 Honda tuning session, do cam profiles and variable advance. There would be no perfect place to log everything down, just the best compromise. And Kyle, it's really hard to have a conversation with somebody through comments, but this guy had like a 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 or 10 paragraphs on stuff on how he was raised and how smart he is and how he was influenced at the critical part of his learning adventure and stuff. But that's what a lot of guys don't realize. And I don't think that this guy realizes too, although he will tell you that he realizes everything. The reality is that there is no camshaft, no matter what anybody says, there's no camshaft that's going to make more power than every other camshaft from, we'll pick a really low number, 1,500 RPM to 7,500 RPM. That's just not possible. If you think that is possible, it's because you're working in a theoretical world. You're not working in a real world. And that's where I'm by no means a camshaft expert, but I have done a lot of camshaft testing, way more than, I don't know what the percentage is, than most people in the United States. I've run lots of back-to-back tests, endless back-to-back tests. And so I know what camshafts do. And I can tell you that I've never seen one cam profile that makes more power from that RPM to that RPM compared to every other camshaft. It's just not available. You have to have, anybody that's saying that they can do that has not done enough testing. They haven't never seen a variable cam motor, and they've never seen a VTEC motor, which is more than one camshaft, but it is very, very cool. I feel like an arse for using a stage 1 custom grind for eagle heads on an 04 block, but should be fun. You shouldn't, man. You should pick the camshaft that you want. The head is on, setting the lash now. Most are 11, but 2 are 4. I need to look at some buckets that fit. Oh, so you're gonna have to adjust that. We use, when I did the, what do we do? The Kazashi thing, and I think the Volkswagen thing, we had to make our own shims because we had to have the cam reground and cut down. So what I did, I took all, I don't think the hole punch might have worked because the stuff was thin enough. We took like feeler gauge stock and used a hole punch and crimped it out, and then so that I used you know, whatever thicknesses of this metal, and we used those for shims, and it actually worked pretty good. People have made it back 2 days in a row. 10,000 bigness, 10,000 bigness cam, yeah. Lloyd Elliott is good for LT1 heads. Golf ball dimple ports for 100 horsepower gains immediately. Exactly, all the golf ball dimples all the time. Make a wrong LSA shirt. I know. I like tight LSAs, and I cannot lie. I ordered the Chopper Cam kit for my Z28. Nice. Currently have a fresh 5.3 with a 706 head. Should I pick a set of 243s or use what I got? You should use what you have. If you have a 5.3, you're not going to go wrong with a 706 heads. You're not going to pick up anything with a set of 243s. Right now, I'm in the process of porting the 4.7 Magnum cylinder heads. Nice. Since I can't find camshafts for this besides the stock ones. You probably could have some reground, right? Can you try Chevrolet Performance LS Series camshaft, part number 8427? Probably not. I don't have that cam, but if you can tell me the specs on it, I probably can give you a pretty good idea what it would do. You're not giving us low RPM guys a hard time? No, that's good. I'm just saying that, and you see this in cam books too, from Crane or Cam Risky or whoever. They want to tell you that this cam works from 1500 to 6500, and I don't know what they mean by that. I don't know if they mean it will actually run from 1500 to 6500, but no camshaft has an effective operating range from 1500 to 6500. Mr. Holder, bigger camshaft, lower boost, lower charge temp, but you forgot lower parasitic loss from the crankshaft, driving the blower at lower boost pressures. So my question is, what do you think? How much less do you think the parasitic loss would be by having a lower boost pressure, but moving more air? Yeah, that's right. I do like Visor. I think he's got a lot of good information. I do too. Visor is and David's just a great guy to listen to. Now that I can control the spark, I can turn up the boost and need a bigger pump. That's right. You got to have injectors, got to have pump, got to have timing, boost, and boost really should be first, I guess. Chad, 3800 guys in the house. I read a Richard Ehrenberg article a while back, and he gave a pretty good report on the Chrysler 4.7. From a stock 5.7 to a 5.3, what cam will it be a gain, and would it be better to get a set of 243 heads instead of 706s? So you don't believe what I said? The guy who's tested more of those heads than anybody. I love internal combustion engines. EGRs for less pumping losses at low throttle. Did I miss the poll? No, the poll's up. Put a turbo on it. Yep. Dart 427 Brodix BR7s. I like the BR7s. We've run those before. 10-to-1 conflicting information on 6165. That's too, if that's a single turbo, that's too small of a turbo for that combination. 2 of those would be good. Just want to make 1,000 horsepower. Yeah, you need 2 of those. So on ported heads, not saying this is the gospel, but way back, Matt tested ported heads on a turbo Colorado. It actually picked up double with TBSS intake versus the ported heads. I don't know what your comparison is there. In a daily driver setup, assuming all other parts are the same, will you lose low speed power with ported heads? It depends on what you mean by low speed. Not normally. If you look at the cylinder head comparisons that I did, look down at the start of the RPM range and see if ported heads did anything down low. Sean, the only absolute is that more displacement is better than less displacement. That's right. I want shawarma. Shawarma's good, and it's Avenger approved. I would get a set of 243s, but if you're keeping it mild, the 706s would be fine. But honestly, I'd pour the 5.3 to 5.7 if you had the same time of money. Don't you don't need 243 heads. 243 heads are not going to make more power than 706 heads. More displacement. Why should we run the 1100 cubic inch Ford game engine like some old tractor? Let's see. I'm going to have to go pretty soon. Slap some turbos on it. I don't know about this commenter, but I don't know if I would call you out. No, people can do that. I want people to do that. That's okay. I'm here to learn too. In no way do I think that I know everything. In fact, in that comment that when I was talking to this gentleman who did know everything, I told him that I'm by no means a cam expert, despite the fact that I've tested hundreds and hundreds of them. Your channel getting spammed by Telegram account saying you won something. Yeah, I saw that. I tried to get rid of all of them. What would you say is the cheapest way to add 400 to 500 horsepower on any motor? Boost. Ported heads for NA doesn't matter for boost unless you're class racing. No, ported heads do matter, and like we talked about, they matter for a lot of different lots of different applications. I found a tuner file for a 3.6 Pentastar in my car. Very cool. And testing the performance design XS intake, you had O2s on all 8. I don't know if we did or not. I'd have to look back and see if Brian did. You always laugh at my shoddy math. Why wouldn't a few more PSI make up for a few CFM of head flow? It can. But wouldn't it be better not to have that extra boost? The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. Exactly. That's totally true. Got a set of cast iron Ellis heads. I can bring them out to California the next time I come out to see RJ and the Big Red team. Yeah, Victor, let me know. Be cool to see a 2,000 horsepower boosted bone stock motor. That'd be hard with stock camshafts. If I can go off topic, I've seen spool improved with the 85 or pump gas. Yes. Well, the 85 makes more power. I'm going to go ahead and close our poll at 68%. Unfortunately, I got to call it short tonight. My wife's birthday. We're going out. Yes. Totally awesome. I will see you guys all tomorrow.